All right, hey, what's happening? It's Robert Phoenix here, booming at you live from the Hill Country in Texas, aka Fredericksburg. What's happening? Just waiting for all the streams to coalesce. I'm over on YouTube right now, saying hi to people. Justin just showed up. What's going on, JV? Justin is in the house. Just in the house. I get it. Hey, good morning, Jennifer. You're here for the waffle iron. Yeah, that's right. We got a big raffle here. The big Tuesday waffle iron raffle off. That got a lot of people's attention over on Facebook. I just have to go down to Salvation Army and go pick up the waffle iron. I wonder if they ship. You know, that's how Nike got their start. Phil Knight used a waffle iron to create new soles for shoes. He was using rubber and all kinds of different sort of polymer rubber blends, and then cutting out basically the soles for the bottoms of his running shoes. So the waffle iron played a large role in the history of modern athletic apparel, but you didn't know that. Although you're pretty smart. Maybe some of you did. Paulette's in the house. There's Judy. There's Justice. And let's see. The Polly Llama is here. Right on, Polly Llama. Good to see you. Good to see you. What's happening over on the 15 Minutes of Flame side as we simulcast, broadcast live? I think I'm the only one in the chat room right now. Let me just check. Let's see. Here we go. Hey, good morning. There you got some people over there. Good morning. We've got Solara. And let's see who else is in the house over there. Judy. Let's see. Solara and Maury. What's going on, Maury? Top of the morning, Maury. All right. So I think the forces are gathering. They're gathering. So today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about Iran. And there's some interesting stuff going down with Nexium, which is a freak show. Nexium is a freak show. So I'm going to talk about Nexium and some of the implications around Nexium. And I'm also going to talk about just general well-being and, you know, what gets you excited? You know, what turns you on right now? We'll go there later in the show. I think it's an important question because we're living in a time where it's really important to find personal motivation to continue to grow, to continue to excel, to continue to challenge oneself. You know, just because the world is in a state of decomposition, and it is, we're in a deconstructive phase. Okay, make no bones about it. We're there. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to develop. Because I think it could be a real trap to watch things go into some kind of entropic sort of decline and then internalize that and say, well, you know, the world is running down. I may as well just throw in the towel because, you know, this thing is really going to go through a massive change. You can't really do that. Okay? You can't do that. Now, your opportunities may be different. Your evolution, your skill set, your path may be different, may evolve in a different kind of way, which is not a bad thing. But you can't just throw in the towel and watch the world go by. I guess you could if you're Eckhart Tolle. That worked for him. But how many Eckhart Tolles can the market really sustain? You're just sitting on a park bench watching people go by because you're so despondent you might commit suicide. Then all of a sudden become enlightened. It could happen. It could happen to you. We'll talk about that. We'll get into that before the stream ends today. But I wanted to talk about Iran first off because it's part of the title of the show, and something went down in the Straits of Hormuz. When I think of the Straits of Hormuz, to me it sounds slightly erotic. I think of Hormuz as being a really exotic woman, like a belly dancer or something. Hormuz, the woman who, she's the kind of the lady in red. She's been kicked out. Hormuz. And the Straits of Hormuz are like, sort of the nether regions. I go there sometimes. It's part of being a Scorpio rising. Anyway, I want to talk about this because it's a really interesting and I think important subject. So I'm going to throw this in here, throw the link in here. I used to, Terry Windsor used to put my stuff up on Rumor Mill News a lot. Back in the day, she was great with promoting my stuff on Rumor Mill News. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. It's a website. Raylene Allen, she does a radio show there. And it's kind of a fun, interesting little bulletin board. So I'm going to put the link up to Rumor Mill News because this is where I pulled the story. Hello, Isla. Hello, Valerie. Welcome to all the new subscribers, by the way. Appreciate your presence, your participation, showing up. Let's see. Here we go. Throw this in there. Bada bang. Should have got in there. Come on now. Community. Hold on. We got to get into the community. General. Okay, there we go. All right. So I put it in there twice. There's one room. Come on into that one room over there. Okay, let's get into this story. This is really interesting. And so Jim Stone is kind of a character, lives down in Mexico, and he's one of these guys that's always on the run. His systems are always being threatened. He's kind of got this, I don't know, this script, this kind of theater. That I'm not saying it's not real, okay, but to some extent we create our own reality. To some extent that's true, and I'm not saying he's creating his own reality, but he kind of is co-creating his own reality. So apparently the powers that be have shut down his phones and whole 9 yards. Anyway, he still pumps out some very interesting content. And this was from his website, which was then posted to Rumor Mill News. I just thought I'd shoot you guys the Rumor Mill News link because, sometimes we've got some interesting stuff over there. And it was Raylene's birthday yesterday. Anyway, here we go. False flag on Iran plan blown to hell. This is fascinating. Check this out. Want to stop a false flag just reported a few hours before it is supposed to happen. The plan was to blow up oil tankers in a UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, operated port in the Strait of Hormuz. I just had Rick James come into my head. And blame it on Iran. This is classic, right? This stuff happens. Little false flag. Happened to the SS Liberty, right? Yeah. Ship that was fired upon by Israeli jets. And Lyndon Johnson didn't do shit about it. All right, so this is here we go. Problem. The Lebanese media jumped the gun and released news of the attack before American planes, which were witnessed by numerous people, dropped their bombs. They could not overcome the social media backlash from this and called off the attacks. That's the only thing that fits. Here is the story according to Sputnik. Several heavy explosions occurred early on Sunday in the port of Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates, a number of media reports say. The reports citing eyewitnesses further suggested that American and French warplanes had been seen flying over the port at the time of the incident. The government of Fujairah denied on Sunday media reports about several heavy explosions taking place at the Emirates port, insisting that the port is functioning as usual. The press service of the Fujairah government denied media reports about the powerful explosions in the Emirates port earlier this day and confirmed that ship traffic is as usual, the state-run WAM news agency reports. Earlier in the day, the Lebanon-based Al Mayadeen broadcaster said, citing local media, that several heavy explosions occurred in the port of Fujairah. The blasts were heard between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. local time. The broadcaster reported, adding that from 7 to 10 oil tankers were in flames. The broadcaster continued by saying that the real cause of the incident has still been unknown. My comment. So there you have it. Here's what I think. Someone spilled the beans because they did not want this to go forward as planned. The U.S. was not going to have who did it identified so clearly, so they called it off. In fact, you can't see French and American planes during such an attack, let alone at the time the report states the attack happened because it was so dark. So someone knew who was going to do this, ratted it out, and to make sense of it all, the reports said people saw the planes when in fact no one did, but someone knew. That's the only explanation that fits. Now, it wasn't quite the new moon, but it certainly wasn't the full moon, so it's fairly dark. So here's another update. This is Stone now, who's editorializing here. I know when the false flag was supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen at 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, just on time for American newsfeed. I'm not going to say how I came up with the exact time. I'm now totally convinced there really was going to be a false flag attack to kick off a war with Iran this morning, Sunday, and someone, capital letters, blew it. I'm not going to say how I know. Yep, milk that Ramadan fatigue just like the prime a-holes would, and they bitch about a Yom Kippur war. Not so, dear Israel. It appears your God was not with you on this one. Okay, Hal Turner apparently quotes the same thing. Says, this is from Hal Turner. For the past 10 hours, numerous reports have been coming in several oil tanker explosions off the port of Fujairah. I saw this the other day over on another website, another message board. In the UAE, local government denies any incident at all, while other sources say several tankers exploded and burned, and that Iran is suspected in the incident. The reports began coming in around 5 a.m. Eastern and were quickly denied by the government of Fujairah. However, the international airport at Fujairah seems to have been suddenly closed and no air traffic is being permitted over the port. 7 to 10 oil tankers in the port have caught fire and are completely burnt. The Lebanon oil-based Al Mayadeen news channel quoted sources as saying, a supertanker, 9165762, Jenny, who can I turn to? The tanker El Majra, 9394741. Another tanker named Amijal, 914-77674. And the Kamsa 10 tanker are among the tankers damaged in the explosions, the TV channel. But it's very specific language. Very specific language. The photo image above is even disputed. No one in any official capacity willing to confirm it is an image of a burning tanker in the UAE from today. It is as though some type of lid has been slammed shut on this. Someone apparently does not want this to get out. They want the news that they want you to see. They will let it get out. Not only will they let it get out, they will pump it. They will pump it. Here we go. I'm throwing this in here. No. Valerie says she used to live near Fujairah. There we go. There's that. You throw it in over on the 15-minute side. Here we go. Yeah, I think it's the same Hal Turner. Hal Turner's a Christian. He's one of these Christian broadcasters. I don't have a problem with the Christian broadcasters, except when they get into their rapture porn. And then I jump ship after that. I can't deal with that. So this is an interesting development. And the reason I wanted to talk about this was twofold. Number one, I wanted to talk about Iran because I said I would talk about it yesterday, and I'm a man of my word. And number two, the mechanism behind what happened is very interesting. Is really interesting, in my opinion. Now, there was a time, like if you were to go back and sort of track what I was doing, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, one of the things that I was kind of working on and working with was this idea that there is a field that is a part of this experience that we're in. Now, the Christian mystic Teilhard de Chardin talked about this idea of the noosphere, and that the noosphere is this like bandwidth of consciousness and intelligence that is something that we can tap into. Now, of course, de Chardin is considered a heretic and somebody who colors outside the lines. Sometimes I think coloring outside the lines information is interesting, right? We can't be too dogmatic. We can't be too orthodox. Nor can we, color so far outside the lines that, we're selling our kids to Nexium, which I probably will talk about, right? So there's, it's all about balance. I'm a believer in magic. I'm a believer that we have this intrinsic software, biological, genetic, spiritual software that's a part of us, right here, right? And we can tap into that. At the same time, we also have to, at times, cohere, I would say most of the time, if not all the time, cohere to a pattern that's inside of us so that we can unfold along the lines of that pattern and then take advantage of our spiritual technology. And we do that, we're doing God's work. That's my 2 cents. Now, speaking of God's work, God's gift to female cats has just arrived. The dashing, the daring Jasper. Jasper the Gold. Here he comes. Right on time. Come on, let's go. Make it happen. Come on. Say hi to your friends. Say hi to your fans. Let's go. So you know what you need to do? You need to eventually get behind that computer. Come on. Okay, Jasper has to find the right moment. Apparently that was it. Say hi to everybody. Hi to everybody. I like Nathan's cat Doshi, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't have to. Maybe he's kind of a Taoist cat. Jasper is more about being. Maybe Doshi's more about. Jasper's more about doing. Maybe Doshi's more about being. Anyway, so this idea of the noosphere, this idea that there is this bandwidth of consciousness, and that we contribute to that. And how do we contribute to that? We contribute to that by elevating our awareness so that our consciousness is vibrating at a high level, right? People always say, well, raise your consciousness. That is a fallacy. That's a fallacy. Consciousness it's always there. What we do is we raise our awareness to a higher level of consciousness, right? And that gets into things like our higher mind, and in astrological talk, that's the 9th house, by the way. Anyway, so when we are participating in life at a conscious level, when we're kind, when we're caring, when we're compassionate, when we're at our best, truthful, we have character, all these things that allow us to have a clean level of interactivity with this third dimensional reality. What happens is that the runoff of that, I believe, moves into this unified field of consciousness, also known as what de Chardin described as the noosphere. And in that unified bandwidth of consciousness, it's not just a one-way event. It's a two-way event, in that it actually comes back into our awareness and our consciousness and ultimately has the highest good that's kind of intended for us. And what is the highest good? The highest good is for us to ultimately evolve towards higher levels of novelty, complexity, creativity, love, right? Service to this higher order. You know, Michael Jones would call it logos, right? Some people would say it's the Christ consciousness or the Christos within each and every one of us, which I believe is true, right? And if we align ourselves with that and allow that to become a participatory agency and force in our lives, we can be the administrators of miracles, and that's where the magic comes into play. Okay, so when something like this happens in UAE, in the Straits of Hormuz, that's when I believe this, how do I say this? This free radical, this agency of gnosis, this knowledge, this wisdom that really has our kind of best interest at heart, because it is us, right, at our highest and most evolved levels, begins to intervene and then interpenetrates human affairs. Like if you go back and read stuff by Dean Rutter, who talks about the Great White Brotherhood, that's another example, although I'm not here to espouse that, but that's another example, right, of this kind of enlightened agency that intervenes in our affairs. I'd like to think that it's us, and it's us at a kind of a rarefied realm, right? So this is why it's important. Like, you don't have to be somebody famous. You don't have to be a Hollywood celebrity. You don't have to be a famous politician. You don't have to be any of that. You know, you don't. And that's what the message was. You didn't have to be a high priest. You didn't have to be, you know, part of the Sanhedrin. You didn't have to be a Pharisee. All you needed to do is you needed to, you know, be able to be a open container for this spirit to work through you. You know, cut out the intermediary. So when something like this happens in Iran, UAE, I'm sure we could probably, if we had all the details, we could sort of reverse engineer it and say, well, this person was involved and this person was involved and this person spilled the beans, and why they spilled the beans, who knows why they spilled the beans, right? In the end, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is that something was averted. And I think these things happen more often than not, and that we're not always aware of these invisible forces that intervene in our lives. And sometimes maybe we are. You know, sometimes we are aware of them, especially when it happens to us personally. Like when we escape danger or catastrophe. And sometimes we'll escape danger or catastrophe and we may not even know it. Maybe it's because we changed our route one day. You know, we're driving down the road. Oh, I think I'll go this other way. One time I had an experience around this, and it was in the negative. It was in the negative. And this goes to show you sort of how this game works. Yes, I know. You want me to tell your story. I tell your story every day. Anyway, so there's this movie called The Vanishing, and there are two versions of The Vanishing. One was with Kiefer Sutherland and who's the other guy? Was it Tim Robbins? I know Kiefer Sutherland was in it. And the director who directed the original version, which is Swedish, directed the American version. The Swedish version is chilling. It's a chilling movie, and I'm gonna, at the risk of being a spoiler, I'm going to kind of get into some of the details of the movie, because essentially what happens is there's a guy who he's a professor. He's one of these kind of Swedish existential Bergman types, right? So he winds up saving somebody from committing suicide. He becomes a hero. And he can't handle being a hero. He can't handle being a hero because he thinks that based on his life and his thoughts and his actions that he's not that person. He's really much more human and perhaps even more despicable than people would perceive him or like to perceive him. So what does he do? He decides that he's going to reclaim his despicableness and humanity. And he decides that he's going to kidnap somebody, torture them, and kill them. And he's got this elaborate plan all made up in his head. And what he does is he goes to a gas station, and the idea is to find somebody inside the gas station, somehow get them to his car, get him in his car, and then chloroform them. And he has this woman who he's picked out, and then the plot fails. And then he winds up getting this other woman, and she becomes this woman that is the person who's going to allow him to reclaim his dark salvation. It's weird, right? And so he talks to her boyfriend. Okay, I don't want to say too much about the movie, but one of the things he says is that the reason this happens because a previous attempt failed. And then he talked about this kind of mechanism of chance, where, because they lined up at a certain point, he lined up at a certain point, and she was at a certain point, and she was able to get into the cart, that it all was kind of revolving around, these few events. So one time I was up at this place called Harbor Hot Springs, and it was in California, and I was DJing back in my DJ days. So I was playing like trance music and tribal music and stuff like that. And I was done, and I was going through Calistoga, and it was kind of a cold, wet day, and I was going to get a cup of coffee, and I didn't get a cup of coffee. And then I thought to myself, well, how did my reality change by not getting that coffee? I thought about that, right? And 15 minutes later, I got into a wreck. And what happened was I was driving this car, and it's my old Toyota wagon, and it didn't have a radio. I lived in Oakland. They steal shit in Oakland, so I didn't have a radio. It was on purpose. I'd bring in like a little boom box, and I'd listen to my boom box, right? So I was listening to the radio, and I was changing the station. And so this is wine country. It was a wet day, and all of a sudden the people in front of me decided that they wanted to go to a winery, so they put on their brakes. And as I was changing the station, they'd stop, and I looked up, and it was like, oh shit. 9 times out of 10, I hit the brakes, I turn, and I avoid them. I've got good reflexes. This time, because the roads were wet, I slid right into them, and I hit them from behind. And I was okay. They were okay, theoretically. They were okay, and and then right behind me, like 4 cars behind me, was a cop. And let's just say it was a point in time in my life where I was playing a little faster and looser with sort of legalities. Okay, so needless to say, I didn't have insurance at that time. So I was like, oh, now this is all a big setup, right? Now, if I had gotten that cup of coffee, then there's a chance I probably don't have that moment. Okay, but I thought about it, and then I kind of programmed it. So at the end of the day, it turned out to be kind of interesting and not terrible, because some interesting things came out of it. It's kind of like life. Sometimes you're given manure, and you can make compost out of it, and that's kind of what happened. But it was so weird because after I got into this wreck, the only thing that happened for me was my light cracked, and had a little bit of front end. There was nothing that happened to the car. I mean, nothing. My car took the brunt of it, and because it was wet, water got into the cracked light. So the wires there had gotten like kind of frayed because of the glass of the light. So the water got into the wires for my lights, and it kind of wound up frying my electrical system. And I was able to drive the car, but I would honk my horn. I'd honk my horn, and then my wipers would go on. It was very strange. Anyway, it's a long kind of story, but it goes to tell you, or I wanted to share it, because we have the ability to interact with higher consciousness. Okay? Higher consciousness. Max Lathorpe says, turns out the number 37 is the number associated with Christ consciousness. I'm 37 and had this number pop up in my entire life. I knew even as a kid something significant would happen at 37. Well, Congratulations, Max. Welcome to the show. 37 is a very interesting number. Let's see, at that time in my life, it was not 37. I was 34. 34. So these things happen, and they happen more often than not. And so I'm not my crazy weird pre-premonition. What happened if I stopped or didn't stop? Because I was thinking of the movie The Vanishing just before that happened. Anyway, power of mind. So you have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to tap into this bandwidth, and the bandwidth has the opportunity to tap in with us. So I know sometimes things look dark. I know sometimes things look beyond repair, beyond the pale. They are not. I'm here to tell you they are not. That there are invisible forces, that there are, for lack of a better term, angelic technologies that are in service to us. But they're in service to us when we are conscious and aware that this process is taking place. It is a two-way street, right? It is not some solipsistic kind of event. So the more that we are intentional with the energy, the more the energy will be intentional with us. Remember that. You're not alone. You're not alone. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are switched on, and that they are, in their own way, points of light. To cop a George Bush phrase, a Bushism. So I just wanted to bring that up. The coup in Venezuela. Here's what I think is happening in Iran. The United States is now the number one producer of fossil fuels. We shouldn't even get rid of the word. They're not fossil fuels. Petroleum. Fossil fuels is ridiculous. Oil didn't come from dead dinosaurs or vegetation. It's abiotic. Planet produces it all the time. We're number one now because there's been a concerted effort in places like Texas and New Mexico and other parts of the country, and they are not done. They're not done. What they want to do, they being the Seven Sisters, the highest producers of petroleum, whether it's natural gas or oil that's going to be refined, is that they want to shut down Iran as competition. That's what they want to do. What happened to the stream? Okay, there it is. They want to shut down Iran as competition. Let me go to, let me do this. We're getting a little bit of pixelation today. Let's do this. Let's see if I'm going directly into the modem now, so maybe this will be a little bit better. They want to knock Iran out as competition. I don't think this has a lot to do with Israel per se, but I do think that Israel would be very happy if they could expand their territory into Iran. I do think that Iran and Israel, I think they're a lot closer than people want to admit. I think there are ties at a high level. There's a big Jewish community inside of Iran. A very large Jewish community inside of Iran. I've talked about this before. But I also think sometimes it's kind of like that game Survivor, where you will axe one of your tribe mates, right? You'll axe them in order to advance your cause and stay alive. And the name of the game here is going to be oil. We can see that already. It was one of the big factors in Venezuela. Another failed kind of coup attempt. Who knows who kind of scuttled that. So Venezuela, huge producer of petroleum. The United States, the Seven Sisters, which are the major oil companies, want to maintain a monopoly. And the reason they want to maintain a monopoly is because the dollar is tied to oil. Right? We have the petrodollar. So if Iran is crippled, or Iran is going to be, they produce a lot of oil. in Iran, if they are going to be kind of relegated to a minor player on the world stage, if the sanctions and the penalties for the sanctions are so large that it cripples Iran's ability to sell oil, especially to Europe, where is Europe going to turn to get their oil? The United States. If the United States can somehow flip Maduro and gain access to Venezuela's petroleum through the Seven Sisters, then it strengthens the United States' monopoly on oil. I think this is really an oil dollar play that's at work in Iran. Plus, I also think that Israel would like to have some more space. But I think at the end of the day, that's what's going on. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because when these things are, like, if this is true, and they really were going to kickstart a war by having a false flag, there's a lot of planning that goes into that. They don't just draw that up overnight. So it's going to take them time to plan another event. And in the meantime, other things can happen, because time is a river, right? It's a river. And between here and here, there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening. And the events that take place between here and here will affect what happens over here. It's just the way. And I haven't even gotten into the possibility of time travel, which is a whole other ball of wax. But you know what I'm saying, right? So now, because this event didn't happen, other events will happen, and it will change the outcome of any planned future events. So something occurred there. There was an intervention, and I believe ultimately it was a spiritual intervention on a macro level. I wanted to talk a little bit about Nexium, because that's starting to bubble up. There are two things now that are happening that on a kind of a global level that I think are interesting and fairly important. Nexium is, like, they're having their day in court now. Claire Bronfman has pled guilty, so she will not have to testify. And I don't know how they're going to work it out with Claire Bronfman in terms of her family has so much money. By the way, what's his name? Edgar Bronfman Sr. He was one of the guys that actually founded the Zionist occupation of Israel. Okay, he's big money dude. He helped out in a big way to plant that flag in 1948. So Claire Bronfman is not going to, get in front of the public, but Keith Raniere is, and some of these other people who are testifying are starting to talk about how weird and sordid Nexium was. Keith Raniere, this is such a, the whole thing with him is so weird, right? It's kind of like, it's really funny. Both Keith Raniere and David Koresh, these two potential cult leaders, are both Virgos. I don't think Virgos make very good cult leaders. But anyway, apparently Keith Raniere was able to get people to do a bunch of shit, right? A lot of it had to do with blackmail. That's number one. And extortion. Anytime you can blackmail and extort somebody, they'll do a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's what happens. Anyway, so it's coming out now that there are some very interesting and twisted ties to people like Kirsten Gillibrand, who's running for president, by the way. And her father and her stepmother. Her stepmother happens to be her father's second cousin. I know it happens, but it's a little odd. I just have to. But anyway, her father was deeply involved in Nexium, really involved in Nexium. See, she's just 1 degree of separation. Well, 2 degrees of separation away from Keith Raniere. I think this could really torch her run for presidency. Not that she would have a chance in hell anyway. But she is really on the front lines of this Nexium thing. And it looks like the Clintons, of course, were getting money from NXIVM, and perhaps even more. So Keith Raniere, they were bringing these young girls up from Mexico, 14, 15-year-old girls, and then getting them in sort of this hierarchy of slavery. And they're talking about it. Some of these girls are talking about it now as part of the trial. Of course, they're branded, and one of them showed Keith Raniere's personal brand. Wow. Anyway, NXIVM is something to keep your eye on. Not necessarily because we're going to get the full story through the trial and the testimony, but what's between the lines and what's happening behind the scenes. Because that's one of those Jenga pegs that if you pull it and it doesn't pull out the right way, the whole thing collapses. So keep your eye on NXIVM. That's one thing to sort of put on your radar. The other thing to put on your radar, and I think they're probably going to wind up meeting in the middle at some point, is what's going on with Barr, with Brennan, with Clapper, and with Comey. This thing is not going away. Barr has just hired his top investigative guns now. His top investigative guns to roll up their sleeves and get into what happened with these three characters, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and for all intents and purposes, spying. They were spying on Donald Trump. And you can go back and say, well, they went through the FISA court and all that stuff. But if you really look at that, the way that they put together the request and how the request was handled by a judge that was inserted by the Obama administration, that it's really sketchy, super, super sketchy. So, of course, if you go deep enough, you're going to find that Hillary Clinton and the Clintons are connected, because they're connected to everything. 6 degrees of separation with the Clintons. The reason why, apparently, and I copped this from Dave Janda this morning, because I was cruising around the internet, is because Brennan had developed outside of the alphabet agency's sort of reach a spying program that made the Danny Casolaro Promise software look like, Earthlink compared to Spectrum or Cox. You know what I mean? Remember Earthlink? You get on dial-up. I mean, Promise is like dial-up compared to this new program called the Hammer. Right? The Hammer. And apparently they were using the Hammer and developing the Hammer so they could spy on everybody. Now, one of the things that they did partially, according to this guy Dave Janda, is that they created this whole Russiagate to steer them away from the fact that they're running an illegal program. Everything in the Obama administration, there was like so much behind the scenes shit going on. And I talked about this a long time ago, that Hillary Clinton, that server, they were running a proxy war off that server. They were running a proxy war off that server. They were connected to ISIS off that server. A lot of the shit that went down in Libya was being communicated through her email and on that server. Because they didn't want to have to go through the necessary channels and protocols. That's what was happening. While we were being distracted by Black Lives Matter and this stupid black and white separation bullshit, they're running secret programs. That's what they were doing. So will we find an interesting convergence between Keith Raniere and NXIVM on the child trafficking side? And remember, Keith Raniere was involved in software development. He was also, that's how he apparently got his chops. He's supposed to be, just look at him. He's a very unimpressive guy. Anyway. I think the two are going to meet in the middle. That's my sense. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and when that happens, the heat gets turned up because the light comes on and the cockroaches start to scurry about. So we've got about 2 minutes left in the show, and that's a good metaphor to kind of end on, and make sure that light inside is switched on so that it can scatter and scurry the cockroaches in your life. Keep your light switched on, turned on, and feed it. Feed that wonderful, beautiful, divine source inside of yourself. Let's see, what do we got here? A lot of mother father talk. Right? A lot of mother father talk in the chat room. Okay, what else do we have over on the other side of things? Let's see. Dave Janda. Yep. Okay. Here we go. Operation Hammer. Hey, listen. People have been saying to me, "Hey, Robert, you're looking really good these days. Hey, Robert, have you lost weight?" The answer to that is yes, I have. And one of the things that I've done is I've started to take this stuff called Zeal. And people have been asking me, well, where can I get Zeal? How can I get Zeal? I'll have some details moving forward. I'm going to try to incorporate some Zeal components into maybe some of the messaging. I'm not trying to push it, but it's been really good for me, and you guys might get into it too. You might like it. It's a really good product. Anyway, I'm out of here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix. Find me at robertphoenix.com and on Facebook. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame.